Here's what we got on tap for today's show. The latest on DeAndre Hopkins and the trade buzz surrounding him. Plus, we'll talk about Robert Woods and Fletcher Graham and Brandon Cox, as those two names have been linked to the Browns during the NFL Combine. Welcome into the Cleveland Browns Report by Chat Sports. I am your host, Matthew Peterson, and we are under attack. We are doing a sub battle with our new Bengals breakdown channel here at Chat Sports. And in the last week, we have picked up 29 new subscribers, while the folks that think that is chilly have picked up 35 subs. So if you want to beat the Bengals, not only on the field, because I believe Joe Burrow is 1-4 against the Browns all time in his career, but also within the walls of Chat Sports, help me out. Subscribe so we can plummet and pummel and beat the crap out of our Bengals channel now at Chat Sports. All right, before we really jump into all the latest rumors stemming from the Combine, which we know is a great time as all the GMs get together, enjoy their Diet Coke and their shrimp cocktails, and a lot of trades and free agency moves start to get made. So here's a basic primer I want to lay down right now. The rumors coming out of the Combine are that Andrew Berry has been described as aggressive in terms of his general manager status right now, right? Looking to improve and looking to not wait around and sit on his hands, but instead get things done quickly. So with that, could we see a DeAndre Hopkins trade start to materialize? I think D-Hop is going to get traded at some point. I don't envision him playing for the Cardinals next year. So could he be playing for the Browns? Well, the buzz and the chatter around Hopkins has been up and down, in my opinion, right? 1 week we're hearing that the Browns and Andrew Berry are going to be pursuing a veteran receiver, and D-Hop makes a lot of sense. MKC says keep an eye on it. And the next week, hey, not a lot going on there. Now, what I wonder is this. Will the pressure to win now push along a trade for a veteran receiver? Will Andrew Berry really start to feel the heat from Jimmy and D Haslam of, if things don't go really, really well in 2023, and it's 3 straight losing seasons, will he be around to see this roster maybe go far into the playoffs, or will they look to cut bait with him? So with that, plus Berry potentially sizing up to be an aggressive GM this offseason, we also had a really interesting interview come out with Deshaun Watson on the Quincy Avery podcast. And I want to share with you guys a little snippet from it, all right? Let me give you a quote. This is from Deshaun Watson, you got to be able to look overall, cap space, trade, different things like that. Talk to the coaches, being able to see like, all right, this is something serious. It can happen. Then you just kind of communicate with him. Nothing too serious. Me and D-Hop actually have been friends for a while. We're actually going to be in the same area this weekend, so we're going to chop it up and see where things are. Nothing's guaranteed. You just kind of let it flow from there. We all know that DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson overlapped for quite some time in Houston. And D-Hop, the last 4 seasons, mostly with the Arizona Cardinals, has been one of the best receivers in football when he's on the field. We have not seen that the last 2 years. He was suspended 6 games to start 2022 for a PED suspension. And before that, in 2021, he dealt with some nagging ankle injuries, if I remember correctly. Hopkins has been limited the last 2 years, but when he's playing a full season, he's a top 10 receiver. There's no question about it. So, with that being said, where do the DeAndre Hopkins trades really begin to start? We did get an interesting report from a Cardinals reporter who tweeted out the other day that according to a couple agents I've spoken with, the Cardinals looking for at least a second-round pick and conditional pick for DeAndre Hopkins. These conversations are taking place at the Combine. The second-round pick doesn't scare me too much. They may be asking for a second-round pick. Doesn't mean they're going to get one. Might fall to a third, right? 31-year-old receiver has missed time, a considerable amount of time the last 2 years, has an expensive contract. Teams might think that's actually a third, not a second. So the question is, does Andrew Berry believe he has time to wait for a rookie wide receiver to develop? Or does he think that that little piece of sand keeps going through the hourglass and it feels like it's going faster and faster, and he needs to go out and get a proven veteran receiver that has a history and a repertoire with Deshaun Watson so they can win immediately? Or does he want to bank on and gamble on his own drafting skills, right? Which every GM touts themselves as being excellent in the draft and knows how to rebuild the team that way. Because if that's the case, then I'm sure he's confident that if it cost a second or a third for Hopkins, he would just take that pick, draft a rookie wide receiver, go young, go cheap, and not bring on a 31-year-old receiver with a, $17, $18 million base salary for this upcoming season? That is the question. Does Andrew Berry believe that he has time to wait on a rookie receiver to develop, knowing he might not be that impactful in year one? Or does he think I need to win now and I don't have time to wait on a rookie receiver to hopefully pan out? So I'm going to go get a proven veteran receiver like Hopkins, like Brandon Cooks, or someone else. That is the question at hand. So predict it for me. Will the Browns trade for a wide receiver? Yes or no? Your guess could be as good as mine. I'm starting to lean towards yes. I think Andrew Berry is starting to feel that pressure of it is win now. We don't have time to wait. I can't hope and bank on a rookie receiver being impactful year one. I mean, David Bell was a third-round pick, and he was mostly a non-factor last year. So you could get another situation like that, and then Andrew Berry drafts a rookie receiver for the next GM because the Browns only won 9 games and he got axed. That's the issue or the dilemma Andrew Berry is facing at the moment. Switching gears here, let's look at this report from Brad Stainbrook, who tweeted out, did not hear any of that DeAndre Hopkins and Browns chatter this week in Indianapolis, but definitely some talk about some other receivers, both in the draft and via trade. Article coming soon. So, other receivers. If I take a stab at who else could the Browns be looking at, whether it's in the draft or trade, well, what about one that's on the free agent market? What about Robert Woods? This has been a name that has kind of gotten a lot of traction the last week or so since the Tennessee Titans released him, and we know that Andrew Berry was rumored to be looking at Robert Woods a few off seasons ago, but ultimately couldn't get a deal done in place. So, when it comes to Robert Woods last year, one, the Titans were just an offensive disaster through the air. Malik Willis, objectively, was the worst starting quarterback for a single game last year, and he played multiple games. And Ryan Tannehill, he wasn't good, but he was better than Malik Willis, so they really needed him badly. Maybe a change of scenery can get Robert Woods back on track. He was great for a good stretch there with the Rams. Was it 2 straight 1,000+ yard seasons? But from 2020 to 2021, his last 2 years in LA, he played 25 games. In 2021, he had that torn ACL midway through the season, just as OBJ got there. 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns in 25 games. That's not bad production. I'm not saying Robert Woods is a number 1, but for that to be a number 2, maybe even a top-end number 3, that's pretty good if you ask me. I don't think Robert Woods is going to go anywhere in 2023 and be a big, impactful receiver at the end, though. Right? I think Robert Woods last year showed he might be on the way down, and ultimately, unless it's going to be for a cheap veteran-ish minimum contract, I'm not interested in signing Robert Woods to a more pricey deal. I don't think he's going to fetch that on the open market, but if it's not going to be close to the vet min, I would probably pass on Woods. But you're the GM, so take the seat of Andrew Berry and let me know what you guys are thinking here. Should the Browns go out and sign Robert Woods? S for sign or P for pass? Let me know what you're thinking down in the comments section. All right, switching gears to our next subject now here, and that is that the Browns are reportedly interested in Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. We got some reports / rumors coming out of Indianapolis that the Browns could be looking at one of the 2 big defensive tackles from the city of brotherly love. So, Jared Mueller, who covers the team for Dogs by Nature, had an interesting article kind of recapping a bunch of the latest rumors. And here's what he said about Cox and Graham. Veteran Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham would be interested in joining Scwhartz depending on how things go with Philadelphia. Cox is more likely to be free than Graham. So we take this and then we sort of add to it with this report from ESPN's Tim McManus, who tweeted out, Eagles free agent defensive end Brandon Graham is generating some interest from other teams, including the Browns, sources say. His preference is to finish his career in Philly, but sense is here as he's open to signing elsewhere, depending on where the Eagles come in with their offer. Now, Javon Hargrave, I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll put a pin in that for a moment, and let's talk about Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. Starting with Brandon Graham. He has played his entire career, all 13 seasons, with Philadelphia so far. He's an older cat. He's going to turn 35 this April. He's only started 3 games the last 2 seasons. In 2021, he missed basically the entire year. This past season, he was part of that Eagles defensive line rotation. So he only started, I believe, 2 games, 1 game, just 1 game, yeah. But don't be alarmed by that. The Eagles look to have a fresh rotation moving around. Now, he played under defensive coordinator Jim Scwhartz while he was in Philly from 2016 to 2020. Like I was saying, though, this past season, Brandon Graham, 17 games played, only started 1, but that's not a huge concern for me because he put up 11 sacks and 2 forced fumbles at the age of 35. He was a very productive member of this Eagles defense. At 35 years old, I don't know if that's the last bit of juice he has in him, or if he found the fountain of youth the Spanish and Malta were looking for so long, and he's good for another few seasons. Then there's Fletcher Cox, his brother-in-arms, right next to him on that Eagles defensive line. He has also been rumored to be gaining some interest from the Browns, and he too has played his entire career with the Eagles. Now, he's only 32, so he's a bit younger than Brandon Graham, and also a candidate to have a reunion with defensive coordinator Jim Scwhartz. Both these guys played under Scwhartz, and Fletcher Cox especially really benefited from Jim Scwhartz as he had one of his best, if not the best season of his NFL career. Now, before we even look at those numbers, let's go back to 2022. Fletcher Cox this past season for the Eagles, 43 tackles, 7 of which were for loss, 7 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. I know the numbers lean towards Brandon Graham, but the age factor kind of brings me back towards Fletcher Cox. Now, he played 5 seasons under DC Jim Scwhartz. When we look at 4 of those 5 years, we see how dominant he was, especially in 2018. He was an all-pro player, 10.5 sacks. Like so many other defensive linemen, his career high in sacks came when Scwhartz was the play caller. 1 forced fumble. That's not a typo. 34 QB hits. As an interior defensive lineman, that is simply unheard of. I know that was back in 2018, but if Scwhartz can recapture some of that magic just for a year or 2, you got to envision that it's worth it. So pick a player for me before we let you guys go. If you could only sign one of these 2 guys, who would it be? Would it be Fletcher Cox, who's a bit younger, but Brandon Graham did have 11 sacks this past season at the young age of 35 in the eyes of the NFL. Pick one to sign, put the initials for which guy you'd rather Cleveland sign. For me, I think you have to go with Cox because he's a bit younger, and I think he's still got 2 to 3 starting years left in him. I mean, he was a high motor player. He has not dealt with injuries on and off throughout his career. He has been ready and available for his entire stint in the NFL by the most part. So for that reason, him being an immediate help and being an immediate starter and bringing a ton of veteran leadership and experience to this defense, I'm going to go with Fletcher Cox. Brandon Graham might have a season left in him, but that would be just it, a season. And I'm thinking a little bit more longer term. I mean, of course, when you're signing a 32-year-old, you're not thinking 5, 6, 7 years down the line. But I'm just thinking of the next 2 to 3 years, and I think Cox still has some juice left in him for that time span.